Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Data Privacy Party installment. Let's get started. Welcome everybody to our next edition of the Data Privacy Party installment. I'm glad to be back with everybody. I know it's been a little bit of time since the last episode. I don't actually recall off the top of my head when that was, but I know it's been too long, basically, all that kind of said. And Happy New Year as well. It's been a while, like I said, since we've been on this. So coming to you from freezing cold Cedar Park, Texas. We're down in 12 degrees or so. Pretty uncharacteristic for this part of Texas, but we get one of these probably every year. Big Arctic blast that comes through. So definitely happy to be in a warm home for the most part, not have to deal with the cold quite as much. There's no sleet or anything, so there's not really any ice this year, which is nice, but still super cold. Try not to go outside. Today's show, I'll kind of go through a little bit, talk through kind of the future of the show. We try to do that last year, try to do that every year, is looking at what are we going to be doing this year, what's the game plan, anything new, and then what's kind of the expectations. So, right now, let's get into it. So plan for the future, 2024, we're trying to do another one episode per month. I know that wasn't quite what we got into last year. Kind of got in about 9 or 10 episodes. I can't remember off the top of my head how many, but not quite where we were trying to do 12 last year, but that's still our goal to accomplish, and then we can move on to the next one next year. Kind of layout is going to be similar to what we've been doing the last several shows. So trying to do shorter 30-minute sort of content pieces, kind of picking up where we left off. So we're going to keep going through the CIPT series as well, just getting some latest news and updates around the privacy world. The goal, like it has been from the start, is just to make privacy education as available as possible so everyone can make informed decisions about their own information, what to do when you see a company flash an email sort of thing in front of you that says, give us your email address, we'll give you 10% off. It's kind of what's the trade-off there? What's the smart decision? And then to bring as much information about privacy practices and tools so you can make the most informed decision about your information. So what we're going to do today, we're going to look back at my 2023 predictions, see how close I was to the mark on any of those, and then how off I was on some of them, and then look at maybe some 2024 stuff as well as some news updates. So with that, let's jump right back into 2023. So the first prediction I had, and looking back, very silly, definitely a swing and a miss on this one to start us off, but I predicted there wouldn't be quite as much state privacy laws because they would all be kind of waiting to see what our federal government will be doing. And it turns out the exact opposite actually ended up happening with that. So it was actually a big year for state privacy laws after what we saw in 2022 with a handful of states joining. So 7 states ended up passing state privacy laws that will go into effect in 2024 and 2025. These guys are Delaware, Indiana, Iowa, Montana, Oregon, Tennessee, and Texas. Of those 3, or of all those 7, 3 of those are going to be laws that go into effect in 2024. That's Texas, Oregon, and Montana. So if you're a resident of those states or you do business in those states, just keep that in the back of your mind. That stuff goes into effect at some point during 2024. That'll be something needing to know. Looking at what some of the past states have done, like Connecticut, Virginia. And if you had to do any sort of changes around that, a lot of it is just providing consumers with more notice, what's going on with their data, how you're collecting it, contact information, giving them the right to opt out. Give them the ability to opt out as well, and then general data security mechanisms in place, just your general IT controls around access and access to data management, data governance, stuff like that goes into protecting. Prediction number 2, this is about a double, maybe even a triple, and it kind of depends on who you ask. But the role of data governance arm of an organization is going to increase with importance in 2023. Data is here to stay, especially ever since we kind of went through the big data craze several years ago. Every company wants it, and we, the customer, are the ones that have it. These automated models that get created, and then the behavioral analysis that's performed against those, are just a few of the techniques that are becoming more prevalent today. So what is the case, and as advertising gets more advanced as the years go on, we started with just billboards, now we're looking at targeted emails, and now it's even pop-up advertisements, especially on social media, and podcasts that you listen to as well, are starting to show advertisements that specifically, talk to you and help you try to figure out how to make an easy decision on what to purchase. They leverage a data lake to improve decisions and become more efficient. So not just advertising, but how can they do a better job of making decisions that affect the organization and can kind of set them apart and put them in a good spot going forward. And now we're finally getting into a period of time where all those organizations are starting to collecting and analyzing more data at more of an automated state. I've been a part of several proposals this past year where companies, not just private, but also public as well as state governments, are asking our firm to come in and do just general data governance, program development. So we're helping create the policies and procedures around what they're doing. We're looking at what data are they collecting, what are their main processes, what processes, what data do they need for those processes, how is it protected, how can we get some data management practices over that, and then how can we help them automate what's going on in some of those processes and actually use that data now that the controls are in place to make those effective decisions. Sort of that business process automation, service offering, that's kind of been a very popular item that a lot of companies, if they haven't turned to already, they're going to be turning to even more so in 2024 than they already have. My third prediction, this was pretty much you call it a home run if you want. This one is not the most difficult one, I would say, to predict, but I predicted that cyber insurance premiums are going to continue to rise. I mean, just as general risk appetites change over time, insurance premiums will continue to rise as more cyber criminals continue to develop different techniques to get data. A lot of the strategies for some organizations now has turned from a sort of proactive protection stance into more of a reactive rollback to previous backup stance. So an example would be kind of along the lines of, hackers exfiltrate protected health information, but rather than the company try and pay the ransom to get it back, they roll back to a previous backup. Now, obviously, that definitely saves the company's operations, so they have the same information that they had, and hopefully they were backing it up incrementally to an effective state. But however, that data getting released still has an impact to the organization, with their obligation to protect consumer information, alert consumers if their data was breached, if that data goes out there and the right, or maybe I should say wrong, individual or organization gets a hold of that information, then they could do some fairly negative things towards the individual. They could learn things about the individual they may not have wanted people to know, if it's protected health information or even other private information that should stay private to the consumer and not get put out into the public domain. And looking at some hard data, Fitch Ratings actually points out that since 2018 all the way through 2023, cyber insurance premiums have gone up by about 290%. 2024 is not going to be any different than 2023. You'll continue to see that cost rise as more and more organizations get breached. And you can see in the Verizon data breach report that they come out with every year around March, that there's just a continued increase in targeted industries. It changes every year. I think the last several years, healthcare and kind of construction and manufacturing have been kind of main targets of organizations. But that kind of comes in waves, and it just kind of depends on where the target is. It also, you'll see 1 year social engineering attacks are going to be much higher, and then you'll see the next year it's targeted server web servers and permissions are what's being targeted, not necessarily social engineering, but it just goes in waves every year. So 2024, we'll see what that has in store for us on that. Prediction 4, this is that data transfers between the EU and US are going to improve. I mean, you can call this a triple if you want, or even a home run. It kind of depends on who you are. But back on July 10th, earlier this year, the European Commission released an adequacy decision that paved the way for round 3 of a framework that allows for safe and secure data transfers between the EU and the US. If folks remember, this was the safe harbor rule, was the predecessor to this current one. And so this makes it easier for organizations to share data. Essentially, the adequacy decision says that there's appropriate regulation in place in the United States for specific types of personal information that will allow companies in the European Union to transfer data to the United States, and back and forth. What's set up in the US has to be compliant with GDPR in order for that transfer mechanism to happen, and for organizations to be able to share more information with others and not necessarily have to jump through several other hoops. If you get that EU-US data privacy framework in place at your organization, then you're going to be able to transfer data without having to go through several different additional audits and other things once the organization gets the framework in place. And a past episode of this installment actually covers what those areas are. So if you want to look back, it's in the title headline, somewhere around July or August. We talk about what those I believe it's 7 principles are that organizations need to know in order to basically be able to cover to CYA with data transfers. The 5th and final prediction I had was that privacy as a service will be more sought after. So kind of hit a bit of a single, and I'd say the the single on this is organizations are looking for a lot more on the legal side of things and not necessarily the technical side. Obviously, it depends on who, a lot of these all depend on who you ask, of course, but there wasn't a dramatic increase in outsource professional privacy services on the technical side of things. A lot of companies are looking at what the legal coverage is, and then seeing what technical controls they have in place, and then checking, do those technical controls provide protections for what the legal requirements are. And a lot of them are in place. There's been cybersecurity being a big area and topic of discussion over the last 10 to 15 years has allowed a lot of these protections to be in place at organizations. And so because of that, you don't see as many technical privacy services being sought after as much as the legal side of things right now. But it's slowly working on it. Like I said, I've been a part of a number of proposals where data governance and data management have been hot topics and need to be included on a lot of those proposals. And it's just something that organizations need desperately, especially if they've never done sort of a data governance, data management walkthrough before, and knowing where's the data coming from, where's it being stored, going in a level deeper than just the system level as we triage down into more of the data level. Bonus prediction 6 that I had was that more websites making customers and visitors aware of their privacy notice when a user goes to the site. Bit of a single on this one, maybe even a double potentially. It kind of depends on what sites you visit, I'll say. It's not a notice that gets presented at front right when you visit the site, a bit of a just-in-time notice, I believe is the right term. It doesn't get presented in the same way when you visit a website of an online retail store. After you're on the site for a couple seconds and scroll, they'll present you with something that says, give us your email, we'll give you 10% off, 20, 5% off, whatever the case is. A lot of times I see 10% and kind of don't barely see that as a discount, to be quite honest with you. But to me, my email is worth a lot more than just 10%. And so I typically will not sign up for those, especially since you don't know 100% of what's going on with that email. The privacy notice that they put on their website is supposed to show. So a lot of websites, when you go to, whether it's the home page or really any page, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, typically that will present you with a link to their privacy policy. And so that's kind of where this single/double that I hit comes into play. They don't present it to you right when you visit. It's more of a, hey, this link is available. Now, they don't obviously direct you to that link, but it's something that's available if, in fact, you ever need to look at what's going on with the how companies manage and collect and store your data. So, one thing I'd recommend for stuff like this is if you try using different privacy enhancing technologies. An example would be Apple has a feature called Hide by Email. So you can create a random email. A lot of times it's just a random string of characters in your settings. And so that email address then automatically will forward to your own personal email address. However, the email address on file for company, whatever you want to call it, is not going to be your actual email. It'll be a fake one. So you can turn it off at any time as well, which kind of makes it a little bit easier to manage subscriptions. I use it for a handful of sites where I don't want them to know what my email is. And it works quite well. You can just turn it off and you won't receive those emails anymore. All right, biggest privacy news that happened over this past year. We've already talked a little bit about it, and I'm going to run through it fairly quickly because I want to spend a little bit more time on my predictions for 2024. But we saw 7 states pass privacy laws this year. That'd be Delaware, Indiana, Montana, Oregon, Tennessee, and Texas. And we'll see some of those go into effect this year that I mentioned at the top of the episode. 5 states came into effect this year. That would be California's CPRA, Connecticut, Utah, Virginia, and Colorado. Quite a few, especially considering the state we were in 2 years prior of just California's CCPA. But now we've got quite a bit of privacy law representation among the states and several more joining the party in the next 2 years. Privacy teams grew by 33% across all industries, and this is per IPP and EY's annual report that they come out with. So as you can see, the privacy industry and those in play are growing quite a bit. It's becoming more sought after, even though professional services still are kind of having a tough time taking off from the technical perspective. A lot of folks are looking for the operational and legal perspective on that right now. To add to the state privacy laws, Washington did pass the My Health, My Data Act, which is essentially a state equivalent to HIPAA. Nevada also followed soon after with their own sort of health data related privacy law. These both are in effect and regulating the health aspect of your data. Think of it as a state level HIPAA privacy law. Lastly, the children's online privacy became a bigger topic after the FTC proposed changes to COPPA. These changes include disclosure restrictions and further limit organization access to child data. So this will actually play into my predictions for 2024. But those are kind of the biggest, all of them fairly on the legal side of things. But those are kind of the biggest laws to keep on your radar as you kind of continue to develop your privacy function at the organization, as well as your own personal privacy and your own take on what information you have and what's important to you. All right, my 2024 predictions. I'm only going to throw 4 out this year, just because of a few of them from prior years. Cyber insurance, for one, is kind of an easy one, so we'll go ahead and carve something like that out. But number 1, the privacy function of the organization will continue to grow more and more as data becomes increasingly prevalent in the organization's daily operations. So yesterday, the data scientist was the main source of insights from data. Tomorrow, we're going to see the individual in the purchasing department being able to come to the same conclusions as the data scientist because of automation and AI. We're going to see these data lakes, these massive sort of, and I say massive, if you look at it from the technical system side of things, it's not necessarily hardware, but software side, where all of these different processes are going to be interconnected to a central data repository that kind of holds everything. And this is obviously you need to be the center of the protection mechanisms that go into play for your data management and data governance organization and policy. But as we see that, we're going to see folks being able to not just query for raw numbers anymore, but be able to see decisions and perspectives get made based on those raw numbers that have been collected. We see how many people register for a certain maybe concert at a certain time of the year in a certain city will lead us to make more decisions about how many vendors we need to be there, how many hotels we need to be available for people to purchase, how many police officers and security needs to be there, and then other things even beyond that kind of develop as we continue to grow that data repository. Prediction number 2, as AI continues to be a developing technology, companies continue to adopt AI and automation, this regulation around responsible AI use and data governance will become increasingly important. Although there won't be much more scrutiny until court cases set the precedent, to combat this, a federal data privacy law will be introduced in 2024. It will need to go through several updates, but its introduction to the House will happen and be passed to the Senate. The likeliest candidate right now is the American Data Privacy and Protection Act. Those of you that have been following the privacy landscape fairly closely, a few years ago, the ADPPA was introduced to the House of Representatives, and right now it's in committee. The expectation is for that one to come out of committee and get voted on by the House at some point this year. Well, it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens, especially in an election year, considering data privacy and AI haven't been a massive discussion topic over the last couple of election cycles, but it's definitely not been as big a technological impact as it will be this year. So we can look to see that possibly getting talked about quite heavily on the campaign trail this year. And if that does, you can fully expect the ADPPA to be pushed through fairly quick, especially if the current regime sees that a loss is imminent. They'll probably try to push something through like that just to kind of put an exclamation point on the presidency. Prediction number 3, I hinted at it a little bit earlier, but children's and teens' privacy will be center stage regarding data privacy and data governance discussions across Congress this year. So the FTC early last year sought to enhance protections provided by COPA, and Facebook is currently under scrutiny by the FTC for violations back in 2012. So that comes from, not disclosing information about what is going on with consumers' data. We have children that are under 13 are using Facebook as well. Whether parental permission was provided or not is somewhat of a gray area to an extent, and especially around what exactly is going on with that data that's being collected for those children that are considered under the age restriction. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how this one shakes out. I mean, in tandem with this, data brokers in general will need to provide more protections over data they collect. Other ongoing cases include Ring, Kochava, which is a data broker, and Epic Games. These are around cases where improper collection of data was being done because consumers weren't aware of everything that was happening. At least that's what is being alleged by the FTC. Obviously, the organization is countering, saying they've been able to provide this much notice and consumers were aware of what was going on. But we'll kind of see how they shake out. I mean, these cases only add to the framework for what is actually considered a violation and how much that violation is going to cost. My last prediction number 4, is now that several laws will go into effect in 2024, we're going to end up seeing more actions taken against organizations as precedents get set. We'll see Texas, Oregon, and Montana join the party, and how other states like Virginia and Connecticut rule against violations. And this is going to be increasingly important as the rest of the states across the U.S. develop their own, as well as the federal level as well. There's been various cases passed through with CCPA, CPRA, and others that have been brought to the attention. But as more develop, that'll be how we get an indication of what exactly constitutes a violation. I kind of mentioned it in prediction 3, but this is more at the state level rather than the federal level. See, which cases do attorney generals will actually want to pursue, especially around the data privacy area. It's one of those where they're not going to touch it unless they have additional precedent for the most part, in order to make a decision on was there a violation or not in this case. I mean, they can follow the FTC's cases against some of these other organizations related to CUPA and HIPAA, FERPA, and some others that might help in those decisions. All right, that wraps up the 2024 predictions. I want to fill you guys in a little bit on what the next episode is going to look like. At present, the plan right now, we'll just update on the latest news, both data breach and as well as privacy related alike, and see kind of what's going on in that world. Our CIPT series will continue as well. This will be around tracking and surveillance, and hopefully these episodes, if you've been listening, have been helpful if you're trying to prepare for the CIPT. And then lastly, might not be a February episode, but we do plan to bring on a special guest soon, a friend of mine who works in the aviation industry, just to kind of chat through some personal aspects of personal privacy related to private air travel and ADS-B. So those will be a lot of fun. That'll be the first guest that we get to have on the DPP installment. So definitely looking forward to that. But until then, hope you learned something new today. Looking forward to the next episode with you guys. Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Data Privacy Party Install. Hope you learned something new and can better protect your information. Like us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, and subscribe to hear more great content.